Yeah, but it's backwards. I can flip it backwards. Yeah, but I don't like that. I understand. I'm going to restaple it the right way. Oh, that's cool. Please rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Let the record reflect we are back in the presence of the jury. Good morning to all of you. Welcome back this morning. I wanted to thank all of you for your patience as we waited for trial to restart. As you may recall, in the preliminary instructions we talk about, sometimes there may be delays. They're no one's fault, but we do appreciate your understanding of that and for being here this morning. So thank you again for your service. We appreciate each and every one of you. So at this time, I will turn it over to the state. Does the state rest?
Yes, the state rests in terms of its rebuttal case.
Thank you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, both sides have rested at this point. So that means you've heard all the evidence and everything. We just passed out to you a copy of the final instructions, so you should each have that copy there with you. These are going to replace the preliminary instructions, and just as I did with those preliminary instructions, please read along and I'll read them out loud to you as well and into the record. And this is CR 2018-118086-001, State of Arizona versus Ian L. Mitcham. Final instructions. Duty of jury. It is your duty as a juror to decide this case by applying these jury instructions to the facts as you determine them. You must follow these jury instructions. They are the rules you should use to decide this case. It is your duty to determine what the facts are in the case by determining what actually happened. Determine the facts only from the evidence produced in court. When I say evidence, I mean the testimony of witnesses and the exhibits introduced in court. You should not guess about any fact. You must not be influenced by sympathy or prejudice. You must not be concerned with any opinion that you feel I have about the facts. You as jurors are the sole judges of what happened. You must consider all these instructions. Do not pick out one instruction or part of one and ignore the others. As you determine the facts, however, you may find that some instructions no longer apply. You must then consider the instructions that do apply together with the facts as you have determined them. Indictment is not evidence. The state has charged the defendant with certain crimes. A charge is not evidence against the defendant. You must not think that the defendant is guilty just because of a charge. The defendant has pled not guilty. This plea of not guilty means that the state must prove each element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Presumption of innocence. The law does not require a defendant to prove innocence. Every defendant is presumed by law to be innocent. You must start with the presumption that the defendant is innocent. Burden of proof. The state has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This means the state must prove each element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil cases, it is only necessary to prove that a fact is more likely true than not, or that its truth is highly probable. In criminal cases such as this, the state's proof must be more powerful than that. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find him guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there is a real possibility that he is not guilty, you must give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. Standards for the burden of proof. There are 3 standards for the burden of proof. 1, preponderance of the evidence. 2, clear and convincing evidence. 3, beyond a reasonable doubt. Preponderance of the evidence. A party having the burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence must persuade you by the evidence that the claim or a fact is more probably true than not true. This means the evidence that favors that party outweighs the opposing evidence. Clear and convincing evidence. A party having the burden of proof by clear and convincing evidence must persuade you by the evidence that the claim or a fact is highly probable. This standard is higher than the standard of proof by a preponderance of the evidence, but is lower than the standard for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This means the state must prove each element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof by the evidence that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. This standard is higher than the standard for either proof by a preponderance of the evidence or proof by clear and convincing evidence. There are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find him guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there is a real possibility that he is not guilty, you must give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. Jury not to consider penalty. You must decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty by determining what the facts in the case are and applying these jury instructions. You must not consider the possible punishment when deciding on guilt. Evidence to be considered. You are to determine what the facts in the case are from the evidence produced in court. If an objection to a question was sustained, you must disregard the question, and you must not guess what the answer to the question might have been. If an exhibit was offered into evidence and an objection to it was sustained, you must not consider that exhibit as evidence. If testimony was ordered stricken from the record, you must not consider that testimony for any purpose. You have heard testimony about people who have not testified during the trial. You must not draw any inference against either party or speculate about the reasons for their absence. Lawyers' comments are not evidence. In their opening statements and closing arguments, the lawyers have talked to you about the law and the evidence. What the lawyer said is not evidence, but it may help you to understand the law and the evidence. Stipulations. The lawyers are permitted to stipulate that certain facts exist. This means that both sides agree those facts do exist and are part of the evidence. You are to treat a stipulation as any other evidence. You are free to accept it or reject it in whole or in part, just as any other evidence. Redacted exhibits. Some of the exhibits that have been admitted into evidence have had portions deleted from them for legal reasons. Do not concern yourselves with the reasons why some portions of the exhibits have been deleted. Do not speculate upon what the deleted portions might or might not reveal. Direct and circumstantial evidence. Evidence may be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is the testimony of a witness who saw, heard, or otherwise observed an event. Circumstantial evidence is the proof of a fact or facts from which you may find another fact. The law makes no distinction between direct and circumstantial evidence. It is for you to determine the importance to be given to the evidence, regardless of whether it is direct or circumstantial. Credibility of witnesses. In deciding the facts of this case, you should consider what testimony to accept and what to reject. You may accept everything a witness says, or part of it, or none of it. In evaluating testimony, you should use the tests for truthfulness that people use in determining matters of importance in everyday life, including such factors as the witness's ability to see or hear or know the things the witness testified to, the quality of the witness's memory, the witness's manner while testifying, whether the witness had any motive, bias, or prejudice, whether the witness was contradicted by anything the witness said or wrote before trial or by other evidence, and the reasonableness of the witness's testimony when considered in the light of the other evidence. Consider all of the evidence in the light of reason, common sense, and experience. Testimony of law enforcement officers. The testimony of a law enforcement officer is not entitled to any greater or lesser importance or believability merely because of the fact that the witness is a law enforcement officer. You are to consider the testimony of a police officer just as you would the testimony of any other witness. Expert witness. A witness is qualified as an expert by education or experience. A witness qualified as an expert by education or experience may state opinions on matters in that witness's field of expertise and may also state reasons for those opinions. Expert opinion testimony should be judged just as any other testimony. You are not bound by it. You may accept it or reject it in whole or in part, and you should give it as much credibility and weight as you think it deserves, considering the witness's qualifications and experience, the reasons given for the opinions, and all the other evidence in the case. Defendant need not testify. The defendant is not required to testify. The decision on whether or not to testify is left to the defendant acting with the advice of an attorney. You must not let this choice affect your deliberations in any way. You must not conclude that the defendant is likely to be guilty because the defendant did not testify. Voluntariness of defendant's statements. You must not consider any statements made by the defendant to a law enforcement officer unless you determine beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant made the statements voluntarily. A defendant's statement was not voluntary if it resulted from the defendant's will being overcome by a law enforcement officer's use of any sort of violence, coercion, or threats, or by any direct or implied promise, however slight. You must give such weight to the defendant's statement as you feel it deserves under all the circumstances. Evidence for limited purpose. You have heard evidence that James Katsilomedes allegedly made a statement regarding the murder of Ms. Feldman. Detective McWilliams and Detective Heinzelman were advised of the alleged statement during an interview conducted in the course of their investigation. The content of the statement is not being admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. This statement is admitted only for the limited purpose of its effect on the detectives and the actions taken by them, and therefore you must consider it only for that limited purpose and not for any other purpose. Character evidence in sexual misconduct cases. Evidence of other acts has been presented. You may consider this evidence in determining whether the defendant had a character trait that predisposed him to commit the crime of sexual assault. You may determine that the defendant had a character trait that predisposed him to commit the crimes charged only if you decide that the state has proved by clear and convincing evidence that 1, the defendant committed these acts, and 2, these acts show the defendant's character predisposed him to commit abnormal or unnatural sexual acts. You may not convict the defendant of the crimes charged simply because you find that he committed these acts or that he had a character trait that predisposed him to commit the crimes charged. Evidence of these acts does not lessen the state's burden to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Separate counts. Each count charges a separate and distinct offense. You must decide each count separately on the evidence with the law applicable to it, uninfluenced by your decision on any other count. You may find that the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt all, some, or none of the charged offenses. Your finding for each count must be stated in a separate verdict. Mere presence. Guilt cannot be established by the defendant's mere presence at a crime scene, mere association with another person at a crime scene, or mere knowledge that a crime is being committed. The fact that the defendant may have been present or knew that a crime was being committed does not in and of itself make the defendant guilty of the crime charged. One who is merely present is a passive observer who lacked criminal intent and did not participate in the crime. Effect of non-prescribed alcohol. It is not a defense to any criminal act if the criminal acts were committed due to temporary intoxication resulting from the voluntary consumption of alcohol. Motive. The state need not prove motive, but you may consider motive or lack of motive in reaching your verdict. Alibi or non-presence of the defendant. The state has the burden of proving that the defendant was present at the time and place the alleged crime was committed. If you have a reasonable doubt whether the defendant was present at the time and place the alleged crime was committed, you must find the defendant not guilty. Third-party culpability. The state has the burden of proving that the defendant is the person who committed the alleged crimes. If you have a reasonable doubt whether the defendant committed the alleged crimes because the crime may have been committed by a third party, you must find the defendant not guilty. The charged offenses. I will now tell you about the crimes with which the defendant is charged. The defendant is charged with count 1, first-degree murder. There are 2 ways to prove first-degree murder. One is first-degree premeditated murder, and the other is first-degree felony murder. The crime of first-degree premeditated murder requires proof that the defendant, 1, caused the death of Allison Feldman, and 2, intended or knew that he would cause the death of Allison Feldman, and 3, acted with premeditation. Premeditation means that the defendant intended to kill another human being or knew he would kill another human being, and that after forming that intent or knowledge, reflected on the decision before killing. It is this reflection, regardless of the length of time in which it occurs, that distinguishes first-degree murder from second-degree murder. An act is not done with premeditation if it is the instant effect of a sudden quarrel or heat of passion. The time needed for reflection is not necessarily prolonged, and the space of time between the intent or knowledge to kill and the act of killing may be very short. The crime of first-degree felony murder requires proof that 1, the defendant committed or attempted to commit burglary in the second degree and or sexual assault, and 2, in the course of and in furtherance of this crime or immediate flight from this crime, the defendant caused the death of Allison Feldman. You must unanimously agree that the state has proven first-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt before you may find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. However, all of you do not have to agree on whether it was premeditated murder or felony murder. If you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder, you must indicate on the verdict form how many of you have found the defendant guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and or first-degree felony murder. By way of example only, the jury can be unanimous as to both ways or just one way, or it may be divided. Count 2, burglary in the second degree. The crime of burglary in the second degree requires proof that the defendant, 1, entered or remained unlawfully in or on a residential structure of Allison Feldman, and 2, did so with the intent to commit any theft or felony therein. Felony in this case includes the crimes of first-degree murder and sexual assault. Count 3, sexual assault. The crime of sexual assault requires proof that the defendant, 1, intentionally or knowingly engaged in sexual intercourse or oral sexual contact with Allison Feldman, and 2, engaged in the act without the consent of Allison Feldman. 3, the defendant knew the act was without the consent of Allison Feldman. Definitions. Knowingly. Knowingly means that the defendant acted with awareness of or belief in the existence of conduct or circumstances constituting an offense. It does not mean that the defendant must have known the conduct is forbidden by law. Included mental state knowingly. If the state is required to prove that the defendant acted knowingly, that requirement is satisfied if the state proves that the defendant acted intentionally. Intentionally or with intent to. Intentionally or with intent to, as used in these instructions, means that the defendant's objective was to cause that result or to engage in that conduct. Intent inference. Intent may be inferred from all the facts and circumstances disclosed by the evidence. It need not be established exclusively by direct sensory proof. The existence of intent is one of the questions of fact for your determination. Intoxication. Intoxication means any mental or physical incapacity resulting from use of drugs, toxic vapors, or intoxicating liquors. Voluntary intoxication. Voluntary intoxication means intoxication caused by the knowing use of drugs, toxic vapors, or intoxicating liquors by a person, the tendency of which to cause intoxication the person knows or ought to know, unless the person introduces them pursuant to medical advice or under such duress as would afford a defense to an offense. Enter or remain unlawfully. Enter or remain unlawfully means an act of a person who enters or remains on the premises when the person's intent for so entering or remaining is not licensed, authorized, or otherwise privileged. Entry. Entry means the intrusion of any part of any instrument or any part of a person's body inside the external boundaries of a structure or unit of real property. Residential structure. Residential structure means any structure, movable or immovable, permanent or temporary, adapted for both human residence and lodging, whether occupied or not. Structure. Structure means any building used for lodging. Unlawful. Unlawful means contrary to law or where the context so requires, not permitted by law. Sexual intercourse. Sexual intercourse means penetration into the penis, vulva, or anus by any part of the body or by any object, or masturbatory contact with the penis or vulva. Oral sexual contact. Oral sexual contact means oral contact with the penis, vulva, or anus. Without consent. The words without consent may be understood as ordinarily used, including but not limited to, without agreement or permission. This includes that the victim is coerced by the immediate use or threatened use of force against a person or property. Act. Act means a bodily movement. And so at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I will pause and read you these final two instructions after the closing arguments. And I will turn it over now to the state for their closing argument. And please keep in mind, again, the closing argument, is not evidence. It's simply the lawyer's view of what they think the evidence is and how it relates to the law. And then remember, the state goes first and last because it has the burden of proof. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Roseberry.
Thank you, Judge. Ian Mitcham murdered Allison Feldman, a man down on his luck, angry, nothing left to lose, drinking too much. Ian Mitcham went into Allison Feldman's home, robbed her, sexually assaulted her, murdered her. You can see there was a struggle in that home as Allison fought desperately for her life. Mitcham made every attempt to clean this crime scene, to wipe away the brutality of what he had done. But he missed a few crucial spots of DNA. Ian Mitcham murdered Allison Feldman, and in his wake, he left a trail of evidence that led police right back to him. Now, Allison had a normal day, 17th of February. She had work meeting with her boss, getting ready for a trip out of town. She did some shopping, went to Kohl's, to Walmart. She got home. You can see she unloaded some things, maybe flipped off her sandals, maybe opened the back door for some fresh air, turn on the TV, relax. Maybe she heard a noise and muted the TV. What we know what happened next comes from horrible still images, piecing together the last moments of Allison Feldman's life. Her life was cut short, murdered by a stranger, skinny 124, which is precisely why we have the evidence we do. In many ways, it had to be a stranger, because Allison Feldman was sweet, gentle. She had no enemies. Harley told you at the beginning of this trial, she never had a problem with anyone. The only way that this type of harm could befall her was by a stranger. There is no directed motive against Allison specifically here, precisely because there's no reason to kill Allison. It had to be a stranger, a man with no connection to Allison's life, other than the moment he entered the sanctity of her home. Ian Mitcham committed this murder. Every piece of evidence points to him, the circumstances of his life, his finances, where he was that night, the timeline, and the most powerful evidence here, we're going to talk about DNA. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the jury instructions, just a few. You've just heard them. You can read, but I'm going to point out a few of them, and then we're going to talk about how the case was presented to you in many ways. The scene and the DNA I will combine, and we will talk about the context and what is important. You all were here, you took notes, you listened, you know this case. We're going to talk about the evidence as it was presented. It has been a month. I'm going to show you images, and we'll talk about statements and context of things that you have heard throughout this trial. And ultimately, we will talk about Mitcham, investigation into his life, and the circumstances of what was going on at the time and the timeline of the murder here. I want to talk to you about first-degree murder premeditation. You just heard this. It's fairly simple, right? And these are not in dispute. Allison was murdered. Caused the death, intending or knowing the cause of the death, and acted with premeditation. Now, premeditation is defined for you. In many ways, it's that reflection that distinguishes premeditation, but it doesn't require a certain passing of time. It doesn't require an hour or a day. It doesn't require a note saying, I've thought about this. It's that moment of reflection is enough. The passage of time alone, however, is not enough. You can't just say, well, because a certain amount of time passed, that's all we need. But we do know here that Allison was murdered in her home. And we'll talk a lot about the injuries to her and what happened, but we know she was sexually assaulted. We know these injuries took place while her heart was beating and she was alive. We heard about that from Dr. Ferentz. We know that there would have been ample time during this fight and this struggle to have formed that intent and to have reflected. That Mitcham could have stopped at any point after entering that home. That Mitcham had to take that time and that effort to kill Allison, to beat her, to rape her, to see that through to the end, to continue that attack until Allison lay motionless. That gives plenty of time to form that intent and to see it through, to reflect on it and decide you're going to see it through to the end. Now, felony murder is essentially, just like it sounds, fairly simple. They're both first-degree murder. This is what we talked about with you in small panels at the very beginning of this case. A person is, in the course of committing another crime, a person causes the death. Could be in furtherance of or flight from, excuse me. It's very, very straightforward, right? The offense is being committed, sexual assault, the burglary, and during that, the death occurs. But the difference between these two is also interesting and important because as jurors, you must be unanimous as to first-degree murder. But you don't have to be unanimous as to whether it was premeditated or felony murder. This is an example of verdict form we get, and the judge will give you after we're done. Essentially, you have to be unanimous as to, yes, first-degree murder was committed, but you could be, some of you could believe it was premeditated murder, some of you could believe it was felony murder. You could all believe it was both. But at the end of the day, it gets to a deeper question here, and that is, the state does not have to prove, and you do not have to find, as jurors, the precise mechanism that was the final blow that killed Allison. You don't have to find the precise order of the attack. You don't have to find that the head injuries came first and then the ligature, or that this sexual assault came and then the injuries to her face. You don't have to, as jurors, come together and all agree on this precise order of events. What is important, and as the jury instructions for felony murder and first degree, as well as the verdict form kind of highlight, is you have to be unanimous. Be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this murder occurred and Ian Mitcham did it. But as I noted, the evidence that we have here comes to you in these still images, comes to you in this reconstruction of what happened in the house that night. And you all, the 12 of you ultimately that will be deliberating in this guilt phase, could have disagreements as to exactly which came first and which came second. It's not necessary for you all to agree, but it's also not necessary for you to agree to reach a verdict at the end of the day. Now, I'm going to get through these pretty quickly because, again, it's fairly straightforward, and none of these are disputed, right? We have burglary as well, not in dispute. These crimes committed inside of the house. The crimes here were first-degree murder and sexual assault. There's no question that Mitcham committing these offenses in this house, he was unlawfully present, right? Burglary, again, it's not in dispute. Sexual assault, similarly. That Allison Feldman was sexually assaulted is largely not in dispute at all. The injuries to her vagina are past the vulva. You've heard that from Dr. Ferentz. That's penetration. That it was without consent is clear from the circumstances here. There's no world in which this was a consensual sexual encounter. Now, excuse me, just jumping ahead, this clicker here. These verdict forms are simpler. I just point that out to note here. Your options are guilty or not guilty. There's not that multiple ways that these crimes can be committed for you to consider. Now, I want to talk to you briefly. You set your deliberation schedule, right? You're in control of that. After the closing arguments are done tomorrow, when it gets finally wrapped up, after I go, the defense goes, and the state gets another opportunity, case will be submitted to you for deliberation. You can go back and decide in an hour, a day, a week, whatever you want. You have no time constraints. Now you finally get to talk amongst each other about this case. It's up to you. Now ultimately, at this phase, you're not to consider the penalty. That shouldn't weigh in your mind. This phase is about whether he is guilty or not guilty. That question is for another phase of this case. You're not to consider that at this point. I want to talk to you briefly as well, before we get to the heart of this case, about two more instructions. Beyond a reasonable doubt, this is an instruction that was just read to you. It's the same standard, the same burden of proof that is used in criminal cases all across the country, every day, down the hall, and in the other buildings, courtrooms in Maricopa County. Same instruction, same burden. It's always the state's burden. It's proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are very few things in this life that we know with absolute certainty, right? And the law doesn't require absolute certainty. That's the beyond a reasonable doubt instruction. Now, I want to talk to you also briefly about direct and circumstantial evidence. I put up this from the case itself, but more as an example at this point. We will get into the timeline in more detail. Direct evidence is evidence of a witness who saw, heard, or otherwise perceived an event, right? Circumstantial evidence is evidence from which you can infer another fact. Just kind of reiterating the jury instruction. But the law makes no distinction between direct or circumstantial. It's up to you as jurors to weigh the evidence and determine the weight to give it. It's not as if circumstantial is put in a box and it's, okay, this is less important or more important. And the example I put here is because here we have in many ways circumstantial evidence, right? We have this Cox security log that shows doors opening and closing. It's not as if someone was witnessed opening and closing the door, but you can clearly infer and strongly infer that that's what happened. That's very clear. It's circumstantial, but it's extremely clear. And on the other side, we have evidence of a witness who saw something in Dan Woodley, who came in and testified. And yes, he saw something, but it wasn't very helpful at the end of the day, right? So just because one is direct and one is circumstantial doesn't mean one is more weighty or less weighty. It's entirely up to you as jurors to weigh the evidence. Now I want to get to the heart of this case, right? What this case is about, why you're here. And ultimately it comes down to identity. We're going to go through the evidence and we're going to break it out, and I'm going to talk to you about why the evidence that we have at this point, at this stage of this case, leaves you firmly convinced that Ian Mitcham committed this murder. Now, from the start, this case was about DNA, right? For the police, this case was about DNA. Collection of this evidence at the scene, this case was about DNA. I'm not going to go back to step one. You've heard this evidence, you know this evidence, but I'm going to put it in context, what pieces may be more important and why, as we move into this house and discuss the evidence that was collected. Now, we know that there's DNA in this house from people that were physically present, right? Makes sense. We know that Harley's hair was found in the bathroom and that Harley was a regular visitor to this house. We know that Alex's DNA is in this house. Again, he was over very frequently and his DNA is in multiple places. We know that Lockerbie and Palma's DNA was found on the dresser and that they likewise spent multiple days in the house processing this scene. We also know that there are areas of the house with, for instance, an unknown third person that was, say, there's Alex is on an item and Allison, and then there's indications of a third person. Maybe that's too limited, maybe there isn't much to say about it, but we know that there are these alleles as well, right, in this house, a house where people lived and where people came. And we know that with star mix, at times, there was even additional alleles that were located at a lower threshold. Star mix can use a lower threshold and find even smaller, tinier pieces of DNA that ultimately show you there might be another person, but may not give you enough to really say anything more about that person. All over this house there's DNA. We know this, and we know that the other thing that complicates the collection for the police is what you heard from several witnesses and what you can see with your own eyes, right? As we talk about these photographs. The pervasive smell of bleach, right? We all know bleach degrades DNA, gets rid of it. So you put bleach on something, the DNA can be gone, or it can be degraded or lessened, right? And everyone you heard from said that, but you can see it for yourself. And there's other spots we'll talk about where we have this clear indication of cleaning and the smell of bleach. Now, as we move through this house, there are 4 crucial areas, right? You've heard this testimony, but there are 4 areas, and we're going to break them up into 4 sections. There's PMH, as it relates to the blood, the droplets everywhere, PMH in the middle of that crime scene. There's the spray over on the knobs, the spray over in the cleaning, and then we have the DNA on the knob. We have the glass pieces spread all throughout the house, and then we have the broken bottle. We have the backyard being involved in this murder, and then we have the Arcadia door, right? So you've seen this evidence, you've heard this testimony, and I'm just going to go through it as it relates to each piece of DNA and why each piece is that comes back to Ian Mitcham is clearly related to this murder. So first we're going to start with PMH. Essentially the first piece that comes back, the kind of linchpin for the police at the beginning. There's blood all throughout this house, right? They tested it, and this comes back to Allison Feldman. You heard there's some blood that, for instance, in PMA here, has some diluted aspects of it, right? Where it's a little bit less, pops out a little bit less. Now again, this is one of those things where you don't have to look at this and necessarily say it's diluted with bleach or with pool water or something else. We know that her hair was wet. We know that the pool was involved. But this is Allison's blood from the start, from the threshold. That's the door right there, the bottom of the front door. It's Allison's blood. Right at the beginning, we have this, right? We have the blood as you move through into the house. That's the corner of the hallway. PMB, again, we're moving through the house. There's blood all over, and it's all Allison's blood, okay? And this is important because Allison's DNA, right? Allison's DNA comes back to these swabs. And this is important as we move through this house because we know that extensive attempts were made to clean this house, right? And yet there's all of this blood, all of this in the home. But this is all Allison's blood. The person who was bleeding during this attack. Right? We have PMD, end of the hallway. I'll zoom in on that. C is the closet in the hallway where we heard from Detective Heinzelman, sort of a swipe pattern. Again, Allison's blood. Excuse me. We have, as we move through the house, the pillar, additional spots where we have Allison. Now here we also have a good example. We have on PMF, major is the victim. We have a minor profile at 8 loci and unable to sort of exclude Alex at 5. It's one of those examples of the lab is able to say we have the victim here, a major contributor, but once you get down to a low enough number of locus, you're not able to say a whole lot more. Here again on G, we have the victim and we have one locus that is an unknown. As we move through the house, this is behind the chair where PMH is ultimately located. More blood, more of Allison's blood throughout the house. I'm going to zoom in on those two, I and J. Again, these seem to be the more diluted drops. You can make of that as you will as far as whether there's water from the pool involved or something else. The lab is able to say on I and J that these are, again, Allison's DNA. So we're moving through this house, and the importance of this everywhere is because, again, as it relates to the murder, we know that this entire area of the house is involved in this murder, and we know that Mitcham didn't clean up all of these drops, right? Because he didn't need to, because this is all Allison's blood, the person who was bleeding during this attack, or Allison's DNA. We have another PMO. You can see Q in the corner as we move to the end of sort of this section of the house. We're going to get to the side of the couch as, oops, it's going a little fast. We're going to get to the side of the couch as well. Not sure what's going on with this thing. So you have the open space here. We have Q on the ground here. Again, we have Allison and 3 unknown loci, not really enough to do anything with. Then we have R, the side of the couch again, and we have Allison here. We can see what appears obviously to be a blood swipe or a blood pattern, and we know that the couch is shoved to the side. Now here we have the number 1 and number 4. These were cut out, but this is where they were on the couch. Couch piece number 1 is another good example. This is positive for blood. The major is the victim. Alex and Mitcham cannot be excluded, but ultimately when they do the star mix, they notice additional individuals, and this is a mix of 5 people. This is a couch, and they ultimately are unable to say more about number 1. Cannot make any comparisons when you get a mixture that large. We have couch piece number 4. Again, this is Allison, and on this one we have some of Alex as well. The importance of these is that we know this couch is involved, but we know that it's Allison. Allison, we have the blood on PMR, and we have the back of the couch, positive for blood, and we have Allison again. Here we have additional evidence that cleaning attempts were potentially made or movement was made over that floor in the swipes, but all of this was left by Mitcham because he didn't need to clean these blood droplets because these are Allison. S, the substance on the swipper mop, the dark substance on the bottom is Allison as well, and then we have the last few T and U. Now, at the end of the day, we know that extensive cleaning attempts were made in this house, right? We know that because we have the smell of bleach, we have the spray over, and it becomes important for the collection of DNA. So as you're looking at this evidence, why do the police think that PMH is so important? Why is PMH so important? It's in the middle of this crime scene, right? It's in the, you go in and her body is in the hallway. There's the blood swiped through the living room and into the kitchen area partly, and ultimately PMH right in the middle. So Mitcham goes through this extensive cleaning attempts as he's going, oh, excuse me, so this is zoomed in on T and U. Mitcham goes through these extensive cleaning attempts and he doesn't clean PMH because look, there's blood everywhere in this house. And he doesn't need to clean this because he doesn't realize that he's left this stain, right? This critical stain that Ian Mitcham has missed because there is blood all over the house, victim's blood. We can infer from this that she is the one, she is bleeding, she is leaving her blood. He has no reason to believe that he left any liquid stain in the middle of this floor that he needs to go back and clean. He has limited time and he needs to focus on areas that he remembers touching, that he remembers interacting with. He misses a spot, a crucial spot. And you can see this yourself. You can see that this is liquid, right? It's not a surprise. It's not a question. These are liquid droplets. You can use your own eyes. You can see the picture of it yourself. This is the allele chart that we talked about previously. The green highlights are ultimately Mitcham's DNA. Now this is important for another reason. We know from later testing that this is a 99-to-1 ratio sample, that there is indications of another. We know in star mix, and we're able to get this likelihood ratio, this number that is so large as to almost be incomprehensible, this astronomical number. It's without question Mitcham's DNA. That's not really a matter of dispute. This liquid stain in the middle of the floor is Ian Mitcham's DNA. And something to bear in mind as we move through this case is when it comes to DNA, I'm going to go back one. We have these alleles, right? This is a chart. This was actually from the initial testing of PMH. They created this chart. And if Ian Mitcham's DNA ultimately did not match, let's say at the first spot he was a 15, 17, and at the next spot he was a 16, 18, right? Then the lab would look at that and say, well, he's not a match, he's excluded. They can't really say much more from two loci if that's all you had, but that would be enough, right? If he wouldn't match, if he didn't hit every single one of these alleles. Now that's important because as you move through and you get these astronomical numbers, in many ways you can apply that to this case, right? Probabilities, you can multiply. The probability of flipping a coin and getting a heads or tails is 50%. Of doing it twice is 50% times 50%, right? And you multiply those. That's the way that probability works. Now, the important thing there is when you have these unrelated events, right? So you have one unrelated event, and another unrelated event, and another unrelated event, and all of these things, all of these alleles, all of these data points point in one direction. What are the probability that all of these things point at the same person, right? Probability starts to become astronomical. Now I'm going to move to the second sort of pillar of the DNA here. We're going to talk about the knobs. Again, you can see it with your eyes, right? The spray over. You heard from multiple witnesses that there was spray over and that there was this smell of bleach, but you can see it with your own eyes. Now, we know that there was also bleach used in other parts of the home. And you can, again, I've shown you this picture, but you can see it with your own eyes. We know that there were bleach used on crucial spots, the knobs and the spots that you can know now were involved in this murder because they were cleaned as part of this murder. Another area that we have, and this is going to be a sensitive slide, Judge, you wanted me to give you a...
I will ask the cameraman not to film this portion. Thank you.
So we know, obviously, from the pictures you've previously seen that there was bleach on Allison's body. We heard about it pooling underneath her and staining her skin. We heard about it next to her, and then that's her belly button on the far right, that bleach staining of her belly button. That bleach was poured onto her body. Again, you can call that circumstantial, you can call it direct. The only inference to be drawn is that that was an attempt to clean DNA. We have her dress, obviously, clearly, again, you can use your eyes, bleach stained and thrown on her face. This is an individual who did what he could to clean up his DNA in this crime scene. He missed critical spots. We have spray over in other areas of the house. An individual looking for cleaning supplies, an individual rummaging through cabinets. Ian Mitcham cleaned this house as best he could. We have the central bathroom spray over. Another picture with the flash. Still that central bathroom or guest bathroom. Cleaning those cabinets. Then we have the bedroom dressers. Again, we know that there is spray over on these cabinets. You can see it here, and I'll show you a few more pictures. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you every single picture that was taken inside this house. But we also know that there was a bunch of knobs on these dressers that were tested and had no DNA whatsoever, or limited genetic information where you couldn't say anything. A dresser that Allison uses, she has clothes in there, it's in her bedroom, and yet no DNA was on some of those knobs. Again, clear indication of a person taking the time and effort to spray these knobs to clean them off related to this murder. We have some where there's Allison and Alex are on them. We have C and H. Lockerbie is on C. And then we have, of course, Palma on K, along with Allison and Alex. So we have some knobs where DNA survived, even at the attempt to clean, DNA of the people who would touch these regularly. We also know that as we move through into the bedroom and we talk about the two dressers, that there was money missing, right? Reasonably infer that Allison had that $5,000 when she came back. No indication she redeposited it. Again, it's cash. Could she have spent $5,000? Potentially. But we know that that's a lot of money to just go and spend. It would probably, the pattern may appear in the bank records in some ways. But what we do know is she comes back with that $5,000. And there is jewelry missing, right? Watches that were never found in this case. So we know that somebody, Ian Mitcham, rummaged through the dressers looking for those items because they were missing when police investigated this case. We know these things are involved in the case, involved in the murder, and we know that all attempts were made to clean them. Now, the defendant's DNA is not on these knobs in this bedroom, as you'd expect from someone who takes extensive efforts to clean the knobs. And that brings us to the importance of the laundry room. Again, another picture of the spray over, just very clear efforts to clean as best as you can. We even know with the master bedroom, Alex is on these handles that would have been utilized regularly by Allison as well. They're cleaned and only Alex comes up on them. You can see the spray over with our own eyes. Now when it comes back to the laundry room, again, we have these knobs, okay? 3 knobs. They're been talked about as knobs 1, 2, and 3, and also as knobs A, B, and C. 1, 2, and 3 were what they were designated at the lab when they were physically removed on February 21st, taken to the lab, and Vicki Beamer swabbed them. A, B, and C are the designations when they were swabbed on the cabinet handles themselves. So what do we know about A? Just victim. B, no DNA. 3, Allison, Alex, and limited indications of an unknown third. But again, these are the swabs that were done at the crime scene, swabbing the knob as they could. When the knobs are taken off and taken back to the lab, you heard from Vicki Beamer, she may be able to swab it differently. We also know from Vicki Beamer that she's sort of the top person over there, right? So she has these knobs, she takes them, she swabs them as she does. And what do we get? Knob number 1 locus, unable to do comparisons. Knob number 3, 1 locus, unable to do comparisons. But knob number 2, a mix of 2 people. A partial profile, 14 of 24 loci, is Ian Mitcham. Again, as you would expect in many ways, because these knobs were cleaned as thoroughly as could be done. But once that knob was removed and Vicki Beamer was able to get a hold of that knob, she was able to swab it, potentially swab more areas of the knob, the back side. And what does she get? She gets Ian Mitcham's DNA on knob number, what she has is knob number 2 once it's taken off and at the lab. We know that Ian Mitcham was involved. We know that he tried to clean. And where is his DNA on this location that was specifically tried to be cleaned? The laundry room. Number 2, that's him again. Now the stat is a little bit lower. Again, it's 14 of 24. It's getting down to that section of it's him, but it's not a full profile like PMH. We have that astronomical number. Now we're going to move through 2 more, the Arcadia door and the bottle. Ultimately, again, the Arcadia door we know is involved in this murder, right? How do we know? From all of the other evidence, the context, the time frame of this murder. We know, this is 2 of the Cox screenshots put together, but we know that this back door is utilized. Every reason to believe Allison utilizes this door earlier in the night, right? When she gets home at just prior to this, and unloads. And then we have the light turning on at 9 o'clock. Obviously stands to reason that Allison would turn on her porch light and that Mitcham wouldn't have rushed to turn on the porch light upon entering that home. So we have reason to believe that she would have opened that back door and left it open until 9:47 when it gets closed. We also know from the timeline of the screaming from Nicole Nesselrode about 9:30 when she's outside and she hears that screaming. So we're getting this timeline and it's fitting together, it's piecing together. Okay, so we know the back door is involved, and we can tell that the back door is involved in the murder because we have it continuing to be open and closed at 10:05 and 10:20. Perhaps even more crucially as we move into the night, it's left open for about an hour, ultimately from 11 to 12, and then that 12:06 time, that's minutes before Ian Mitcham leaves the house for the first time at 12:13, right? He opens and closes the door at 12:12, 12:13. Turns off that porch light, right? At 12:16, excuse me. He turns off that porch light, closes the door again, and then goes out the first time. We have every reason to believe that at that point in time, Allison Feldman was already dead long before. We have the 9:30 time, but we also know even more as we get into the specific timeline of the murder, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, from her phone, from her texts as well. So we know that back door is involved, right? Without a question. It had to be opened at some point during this murder. It's being utilized, it's being touched because there's blood on the inside track. You heard from Detective Heinzelman that that inner track has swipe patterns as if something is being taken out of the door. We know that this attack spills outside just as clearly because we have the rug in the pool. Ultimately, this comes up with the victim's blood. It's a partial singular profile that leads back to the victim, but it's positive for blood. This is obviously blood from that rug that matched that area in front of the Arcadia door and its involvement. We also know that this connects out to the outside because of what's clear from the pool area, right? The missing tile. We know from the blue star that either there was blood here or extensive attempts to clean up. We know that in this pool was this broken tile with Allison Feldman's hair. We know that there was the hair clump from the pool separately that also was Allison Feldman's DNA. And ultimately we know that the earring found in the pool was the earring she was wearing on the night she died. Without question, this attack spilled outside and involved the pool. We know from the opening and closing of the doors that the Arcadia door was utilized in part to get into that backyard. Now, it's also interesting because as we move back, a couple more pieces here, the outside glass, which we'll get to next, the blood on the outside area of that Arcadia door. Again, the blue star indicating blood, extensive cleanup was involved in that outside area. And ultimately, it's interesting because we know that Ian Mitcham is on that exterior Arcadia door handle. We have this fairly significant stat, not as high as the PMH. This one is also a partial profile, but stronger or more DNA is present. We also know that the interior Arcadia door handle didn't have enough DNA to make any comparisons. That's interesting because it's a door handle, right? People touch this thing all the time. Again, the reasonable inference is that he cleaned what he could remember, what he thought to clean, tried to clean. We know the back door is involved. Stands to reason that the interior Arcadia door handle had attempts to clean it and remove DNA as well, from the sheer fact that you didn't get even Allison or Alex. But ultimately, what's most important is the exterior Arcadia door handle. The third place involved in this murder, we know from the blood, from the opening and closing of the door, from the timeline. And that's another place where Ian Mitcham's DNA is found. And lastly, for this section, I'm going to talk about the bottle, right? Found on the 21st of February, the last day, under the couch. Here we see additional staining on the floor, some of which from the processing. You can see evidence, placards, and cards. You can see the void where the couch was covering in the bottle there in that photograph. Again, as the detective noted to you, it's kind of hard to see, but he was there. This couch has about 1 inch like black legs on it with that felt that kind of hangs down underneath. You can see the silver piece that's screwed into the bottom of the leg, but it's kind of hard to make out the precise height of the leg. The couch is high enough for a bottle like that to have slid under it and get caught in that, up in that felt material. We also know, of course, that this bottle is extremely important as it relates to the murder. Again, largely unquestionable. We have glass pieces all over this house. We have PMP by that breakfast bar, the other side of the kitchen, which is Allison's DNA. We have shards of glass in other locations. W and E here, more shards. The E is a little bit larger chunk you can see here. Again, you can use your eyes. This is glass, beer bottle, pieces all over this house. W, shards on the other side of that, glass. We know that attempts were made as well to clean this glass because there's not enough to make a whole bottle, right? The detectives told you that. Mitcham made attempts to clean this glass and remove what he could from the scene, remove what he could get. He doesn't have forever, right? He needs to do what he can, and he cleans what he can. But he obviously misses a spot under the couch. Doesn't look under the couch. The detectives didn't think to look there until the last day when they were removing it. There's glass all over this house. Even in this living room area where the couch is. O and Q of glass next to them, right? Little pieces spread throughout the house. Consistent with it being involved in this murder. And by the back door as well. I just showed you the one with the glass right outside the door, but there's glass right inside the door as well. This glass involved in this attack. So ultimately, in the picture of glass right inside the door and right outside. Everywhere that this murder took place, we don't have glass in the spare bedroom. We don't have blood in the spare bedroom. There's areas of this house where there's blood, where there's glass. You can tell that this murder took place. All the areas where we also find Mitcham's DNA. Now we know this bottle is involved. We know it's ultimately found under the couch, and we know that Detective Heinzelman picks it up with his gloved finger there, holds it up. And it's just this neck of the bottle. Now on this bottle, we have Allison and Mitcham. When we get to star mix, we get indications of a possible third on some of this bottle. Again, not enough to do anything more with. But we know that we also have ratios for this bottle, right? We know on the cap end, and I'm going to just look down at my notes because I want to get this precise, we have the ratio described by Vicki Beamer as 53, 46, and 1, right? So she's able to say that Mitcham is on this cap end and Allison is on this cap end. We know that when we put this into the program, it tells us there's a ratio of about this 53, 46, and 1, right? Same thing with the broken end. We have Allison Feldman and Ian Mitcham. Indications of a third contributor. But again, this ratio now is 80, 16, and 3, right? Again, with DNA, this ability of star mix to parse even tinier and tinier quantities of DNA, but don't let that distract you from the clear and obvious DNA that's on this bottle, from the incredible ratios of the two individuals on this bottle, and ultimately, these are charts we've showed to you earlier, but just the clarity of this. The green is Mitcham, broken bottle cap end, and broken bottle broke end. The green is Mitcham, the pink highlights are Allison. You can go through and just look with your own eyes. What alleles, how many short tandem repeats are present at this locus? What can that tell us about who's on this item, whose DNA this is? And if there were alleles here that excluded Mitcham, if he didn't have the alleles here, the 17, 20, the 11, 12, right? If there were alleles that excluded him, then the lab would have excluded him. But again, you have this probability. It's astronomical probability, right? This 4.70 times 10 to the 27th power. I put the zeros in there. It's essentially 25 zeros, 4.70, and the remaining zeros. This astronomical number, right? For the broken end, it's 3.32 times 10 to the 15. I didn't put that one up there as well. It'll be a lot of numbers. The point here is, again, in another location in this house, we have indisputably Ian Mitcham's DNA, and we know that this bottle is involved in this murder. You can see it for yourself, the glass all over this house, consistent with the beer bottle being involved with this murder. We also know, what we'll get to in a moment, testimony from the medical examiner. Ultimately, you have Mitcham's DNA in these 4 locations. I put these up there, the dates and the people, because it's interesting that on February 18th, the first night of the police response, Vicki Beamer swabs PMH. On February 20th, Amber Metz swabs the exterior door handle. And the importance there is just that it's another person. It's not Vicki, it's not Heinzelman. On the 21st, an individual collects the knobs. Carpenter, you didn't hear him testify, but we heard that he was observed collecting those knobs. Now, those knobs were swabbed as well. Those swabs, like we mentioned, didn't come up with DNA that had been cleaned, but we have the 21st is when it's physically removed. And then also on the 21st is when Heinzelman touches that glass bottle, picks up that glass bottle, right? So these are found. It's not as if police just looked at one and said, grab that one, boom, we've got our guy, right? They collected all of these things from all over the house, different days, different times, different people. They're tested months apart. But each time this test comes back, okay, we got PMH, strong, single source is what she called it, male. Okay, later. Oh, we've got him here too. We've got him on the knob. Later, we've got him on the Arcadia door, right? The bottom. So the police, of course, are focused on DNA, right? Because whoever left this DNA in the house, whoever left it in these crucial spots, these spots that we know are involved in this murder, did it. It's that simple. Police focus on the DNA for the obvious reason that it's that powerful and it's that important. Here we have it just laid out in the diagram of the house. PMH is here. The bottom, the laundry knob above the washer and dryer. And we have the Arcadia door thing on the right, and the bottle under the couch. Again, in all of these locations where we have indication that this murder took place, this murder was involved in, indications, areas where they're critical to the murder and they were attempted to be cleaned, like the knob, or missed, like PMH in the bottle under the couch, right? Consistent with what you know about what happened in that house, what you can tell from the police investigation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the medical examiner at this point. Judge, these are going to be about 3 to 4 slides that are sensitive.
Okay, and we will not film these. Thank you.
So consistent with Mitcham being unable to clean all of his DNA despite his best efforts is what happened to Allison, right? This was an attack, a fight, and you can tell that. You can reasonably infer that. This wasn't a gunshot wound to the head, you know, where that's it, one shot, nothing else happens, right? This wasn't a, you know, an accidental, you know, discharge. This was a fight for her life. And again, you don't all have to agree which injury was first or second, but we know she was alive from the medical examiner. We know she had blood pressure, her heart was beating.
object to her chest that would leave like an identifiable bruise or specific injury. It's more broad compression to her chest that contributes to that injury he sees internally. It also is an asphyxial injury, an inability to breathe due to that compression. You have that combined with the ligature. You have the head injuries to the front of her face, the blunt injuries to the back of her face. We have here indications that this was not quick, right? It had to be in an attack. You had to effectuate these injuries. You can't do them all at once, right? And the last injury we know, that I'm not going to show a picture of, is a vaginal injury, right? Wholly another section of her body. Hemorrhaging. She has blood pressure. She's alive. This laceration extends 2.5 inches into the vagina, past the vulvar structures, as Dr. Ferenc said, right below the cervix. Now that's important, obviously, for penetration, for sexual assault. That much is clear. It's also interesting, and Dr. Ferenc was fairly clear, and he said that this is more likely caused by an object. You wouldn't see this in his training and experience, that if you used your penis, this would cause injury to the penis as well, right? This type of extreme injury. He said it's extremely, extremely, extremely unlikely that this could be caused by a penis. He said a glass bottle like this could cause it with the edges, not saying it did or didn't, but that the edge of the cap, the slanted edge, or another object. He's seen objects cause lacerations like this in his career that were other things as well. The point is, this is all consistent with what we know about what happened here and with the DNA that is left. We have reason to believe that the bottle is involved and that a struggle. Allison is fighting for her life. Even the defense's DNA expert said, in this kind of fight, something like this, a murder like this, you'd expect to leave DNA, right? It'd be impossible to just clean up everything. And throughout that attack, as these pictures are also relevant for us, I've shown them to you today, and asked you to look at them again, is for premeditation, right? Because this attack is not over in a moment. It's not over in a second. It takes time to accomplish all of these injuries, right? You don't strangle someone, and as the doctor described, even the pinching, the one hand, the sort of pinching motion and the injury he could see internally to the throat. You don't need to use your hand and a ligature and bash someone's head in. You don't need to do all these things to someone that's already died, right? This is against someone who's still struggling. But DNA is the driving force in this case. It always was from the beginning, because that's what's at the scene. And as defense expert and every expert, the DNA tells you who. DNA is identity. And that's what we have in this case. Obviously, it cannot be that a certain piece of evidence is required for conviction. There's not a certain thing, a certain statement by a suspect, a certain weapon recovered, or a surveillance recording. It's up to you as the jury to determine the evidence that leaves you firmly convinced. And the investigation here, as it focuses on the murder, sprawls out for 3 years, right? It sprawls in all different directions. We know that Alex is a piece at the very beginning, that follow-up interviews were done because his DNA is in the house. He's her roommate, his roommate was contacted, he's her boyfriend, his phone was looked into. But his DNA is there for a reason, and all of these avenues that police investigated did not point to Alex, right? So of course they do their due diligence. The boyfriend is one of the first people you might look at, but he's excluded, he's out. So they keep looking. They focus on the DNA because whoever left this DNA committed this murder. They focus on PMH, the door, the knob, the bottle. And for 3 years, police search high and low, right? And they collect samples from 150 plus people. They test these samples. They go out, any man walking in the area, because the DNA is that important. And Judge, I'm probably 60% through. I think it might be a good time to break.
All right. We'll go ahead and take our lunch break. Please remember that admonition. And I apologize, I meant to tell you this when you came in, but I just wanted to let you know we're still within the time screen. We expect to still be done before the end of May. And as you know, you were screened through the end of May. So just wanted to let you know that. And again, please remember the admonition, and we'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you.
Thank you.